What's up, real MVPs? Ricky Widmer here for a special podcast. You might be wondering, well, Ricky, you guys aren't doing really podcasts anymore. Why are you saying you're back with a podcast? MVP no longer most valuable podcast, it's just MVP. What is going on? Well, this is a special brainchild. This is something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. For years and years and years, I wanted to do wrestling content for MVP. And I've done a few things, videos, a little bit of predictions, but I never got to have these long-form conversations about wrestling that I love to have. And there is someone near and dear to us, a friend of mine. He's a dear friend of mine. And I asked him, I said, would you like to do a wrestling podcast for the new and revamped MVP? Of course, he said yes. I'm going to introduce him now. His name is Soapy Muffin, the first edition of the MVP Wrestling Podcast. Soapy, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I am doing great. And what I have to do is I'm putting up my hand. It's going to be out of focus a little bit. You cannot see me, Soapy, but I'm giving you the too sweet. I'm giving you the too sweet so that we can... do that like the old NWO. This is a brainchild that Soapy and I have had because I'm going to go into it a little bit because this is it's a test episode, but if this goes well enough, this will be episode 1. And Soapy and I have talked wrestling in our personal Discord for which seems like forever. And after a couple conversations, I've always told Soaps, I was like, we need to record this. These conversations need to be recorded because they are some of the best wrestling conversations that I have. And they get me thinking. And Soapy's on a different side than what I'm on. And that's why we're starting this. And how this is going to work is it's going to be a monthly rendition. Once a month, we're going to come out with a podcast. We're going to talk about maybe one topic. There might be more topics. Usually it's going to be one centralized topic. And that's what it's going to be. 1 month, each and every month. That's how you get it. And for this edition of the MVP Wrestling Podcast, we've got a special one. We're talking about The Miz. And this article that I'm looking at from comicbook.com is from July 17th. So as we're recording this 10 days ago, this happened. And Mike the Miz Zanin, did an interview at comicbook.com. And I'm just going to read the section that was the juicy part from this article. Link will be down below. It says... Finally, Miz was asked about an Instagram post he made back in February, right after WWE announced that WrestleMania 37 would take place at the new SoFi Stadium just outside of LA in March of 2021. The former WWE champion made a bold statement. If he doesn't make it to the WrestleMania main event, a spot he reached 10 years prior as WWE champion, he'll quit. Here's the exact quote. He said, I make goals for myself that sometimes almost you look at and go, that's unattainable. And every goal I've ever had, I've accomplished, and then some. This is a goal I have. This is a goal that I've set out to do. It's a goal that I said, I'm going to main event WrestleMania 37. That's exactly where I need to be. And that's what I plan on doing. There is no other options for me. That's the option. That's the way I shift my mind and I focus. It's just the way I am. I make a goal for myself and I do everything in my power to achieve that goal. And I haven't had a goal that I haven't met. Soapy, I want to ask you the plain question. It's the question of this video, of this podcast on our YouTube channel. Should The Miz headline WrestleMania 37?
I will start this off by saying I absolutely love The Miz. He's always been one of my favorite heels in WWE. And I'm going to start it off by saying I think it really depends on, how everything is with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things of if we're still in the thick of it, like we still don't have like Roman Reigns in the company, obviously, Becky's not going to be around anyways because she's having a child.
Uh-huh.
Like if we're not going to be having some of the actual main eventers, I'm
Mm-hmm.
a-okay with him main eventing. I think it's just one of those things of, and I'll be brutally honest, I'll probably get into this later. I think he would need a very specific situation to be able to main event WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I think outside of that, if the world's back to normal, COVID has, or at least it's controlled, we can start having crowds assemble. We probably will see the return of Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, once all that fun stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, then I don't think he stands a snowball's chance in hell in the main event. He would once again need a very specific situation, which would be way too fucking narrow to most likely happen. But
Yeah.
I could touch on that one later when that one comes up.
To me right now, I think the Miz is in a very weird spot because obviously, like, there's two things that cross my mind. Is this interview supposed to be a shoot where, and correct me if I'm using this wrong because sometimes I fuck it up, where is this supposed to be part of the act, part of the storyline? Is he giving this answer to play into where it's like, you know what? I am going to main event, and I know I'm not there right now, but it's going to be a goal that I'm going to obtain. And he kind of, you kind of see like the kayfabe of like, ooh, is there tension between him and backstage? Is he kind of putting in that, hey, I'll go do Cannonball and I'll go do Miz and Mrs. I don't need to do wrestling anymore because I'm the A-lister. I'm the Miz. Or is this seriously him doing that, saying, I don't like how I'm being used. If I am not headlining WrestleMania in Hollywood, where if there was a WrestleMania for him to headline, it would be the one in Hollywood. Is this him really pushing his muscle, or is this kind of like a storyline thing? Because I look at The Miz and you look at his matches, he hasn't won a match. The last match he won was on May 8th. It was a taping of SmackDown where it was a 8-person tag match where himself, Steve Cutler, Wesley Blake, and John Morrison beat Big E, Grand Metalik, Kofi, and Lindsay Dorado. The last time he has won a singles match was on January 10th of 2020 when he beat Kofi Kingston. That was right before he went ahead against The Fiend at the New Year's Revolution Super Show, and he lost to The Fiend. This was right after his feud with Daniel Bryan. I look at The Miz right now and it's like, do you think he's saying this because he might be unhappy with how WWE is using him? Yes, he gets to work with one of his close friends in John Morrison, but he's not really used in any storylines. Right now it's just, hey, we need a tag team here. Oh, we need you to go up against Braun Strowman. Oh, we need you to do the Miz TV thing. Do you think this is him really pushing against Vince, or is this just a kayfabe thing?
I think it may be a little bit of both. Like I think they do want to do something with the Miz because it's one of
Mm-hmm.
those things of, it's like I feel he's always been kind of like a divisive character in the wrestling fandom of where it's like older people don't really care for him
Yeah.
and like younger people who kind of grew up with the Miz like me Like, I like The Miz. It's one of those things of, I think it's a mixture of both, of where it's like, I think he's one of those people, and we've had this conversation before about people who are like upper mid carders,
Mm-hmm.
who have like every once in a while, if they went for the main title, I wouldn't be mad. I feel he's one of those people,
Mm-hmm.
of where it's like I think he's best served in the intercontinental like U.S. champion area, but like he should be kind of in the upper echelon. Like it should be, if he has the belt, he's using it to elevate people.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things of, I think with this situation, I think this may be one of the times it's like, all right, if this is kayfabe, this could be them being like, maybe, like, obviously, I don't think they'd push him. I don't think they'd do it as like he's a heel,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it ties into what I was saying before of, I don't think he stands a snowball's chance in hell of making the main event as a heel.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has to be a babyface for it. And I think with this one, it's like, it's showing like he's going to have this drive. He's going to have this work ethic to get to that moment. So I hope it's kayfabe of where this is indicative of like, he's probably going to get the second title run. He also may probably not. Who knows?
Now,
But
here's something that just jumped into my head. He doesn't have to win the match, right? He's just saying
true.
headline. Like, correct? Like, are we thinking he means just be in the match or actually win the match?
I think he's meaning like being in the match,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it would probably, sweeten the deal if he won.
Because there's one match, like, so the one that's pretty obvious is many people would say, oh, put him against AJ for the IC title. But to me, there's two things. First off, we've talked off the podcast, and I kind of agree with you. I don't think the IC title's ever going to be the main event of a WrestleMania. Like, in order to be the main event of a WrestleMania, you have to be a championship match. Like we had the Women's Championship, the WWE Championship, or the Universal Championship. The only other thing that could supersede that is if we have like a huge storyline, like a la Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. Because like that wasn't for the championship, but that was a big enough moment to where it's like, that's the main event of this WrestleMania. And there's a part of me that even thinks about, is there a storyline out there that could put The Miz above a championship match?
See, and I don't know if something like that is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mostly trying to think, like, I think the only thing, like, storyline wise that could be like that is a situation of where they use that exact quote of the "I'll quit if I don't main event or I don't headline." I think that's the only type of storyline you could go with to get him there.
Mm-hmm.
And even at that, I can't really think of anybody that him doing that would make me be like, oh shit, dude, I can't wait to see The Miz versus this person at the main event, when I would rather watch, I don't know, like Drew McIntyre versus someone else,
Mm-hmm.
or Randy Orton versus someone else.
There's one match, though, that I think about that, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, so bear with me. You mentioned how in order for him to be the main event, he has to be a babyface, right?
Yeah.
What if, title or no title, because we don't know what they're going to do with this character. On SmackDown, he kind of defeated the Universal Champion, but we don't know what happened to our Universal Champion. Could we see a revival of The Fiend versus The Miz at WrestleMania? Like, could it be a storyline where The Miz goes after Bray Wyatt and The Fiend again Because A, it was a storyline that he lost. The Fiend threatened his family. He lost that feud. Is that something that they even revisit? Or is it just like he's in a title picture against, like, I don't know, Braun Strowman? Because, like, Braun would still be the Universal Champion unless they're going to put it on The Fiend. Like, I think, would The Fiend be a feud that they would revisit with The Miz? Because I kind of have the feeling that unless they have a championship match in mind, which we're going to get to one that they may have in mind a little bit later, but I kind of have a feeling that The Fiend might be the one that's just, if de facto, he's the main event.
See, with me, it's I look at it as I don't see why they would revive that feud, and
Because there wasn't
reason I
really
think
nothing special to it.
yeah, it was like I just think there's nothing really left like from the remnants of that feud. It was the Miz got beat, reverted character to where now he had to go back to the dirt sheet.
Yeah.
Tag team with John Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think there's anything that he could like. There's nothing left in that feud for me to be like, I want to see these two go against each other again. And even that, I don't know if that would be main event. Like, don't get me wrong, I love The Fiend. I think The Fiend right now is one of the, and arguably probably the biggest name in the company. I don't know if that's absolutely asinine for me to say, but like, I don't think it's. I'd say without a reason of doubt that like he's definitely like top 3 name in company. But like, I don't know if name value alone gets you into the main event.
So, everyone on YouTube saw my eyes get big while you were talking, Soapy. Because I just had a thought come into my head. This isn't a main event thought. I know that. Because I don't know if there's an option to be a main event option for The Miz. But what if they did this? So what if they did, because here's the wrench to it. It has to do with the IC title. Here's the wrench with the IC title. Are they gonna have it be put on Matt Riddle anytime soon? Because, like, Matt Riddle challenged for it right away. He lost. Now he's in a feud with Baron Corbin. It looks like they want to push Matt Riddle to the moon, and I'm assuming eventually they're gonna put a title, whether it be an IC title, I think, on him. But let's say they're not gonna put a title on Matt Riddle. A storyline I just thought of that kind of brings back the Miz's past in a way, and it pushes a guy that it seems like WWE wanted to push and they could use a feud to do this. What if they did, first they did The Miz and AJ Styles. AJ would drop the title to The Miz at SummerSlam. Because right now we're in a kind of state of flux with the IC title, where you've got Grand Metalik. At the time we're recording this, Grand Metalik is challenging for it on the next SmackDown coming up. They just had, a Fatal 4-Way or a Triple Threat match? Yeah, Fatal 4-Way it was, to decide who was going to challenge AJ for the IC title on SmackDown this upcoming week. And what if they did, The Miz basically is like, well, if Daniel Bryan offered you to be a fighting champion, I want to be a champion again. And they start a feud with AJ. AJ drops the title to The Miz at SummerSlam, and they do a long-term storyline that ends with Daniel Bryan comes back, but Daniel Bryan isn't coming back to battle The Miz for the IC title. Daniel Bryan is coming back as a manager role to Drew Gulak. and Drew Gulak wins the IC title off of The Miz at WrestleMania.
See, I like that, but I think my main thing...
Is that shooting Gulak too high?
I think it's one of those things of, like, with that storyline, is that also still taking into consideration, like, are we splitting WrestleMania into a 2-day event?
Yeah.
Because I think that throws the biggest wrench into it of if they do what they did with WrestleMania 36, of it's a 2-day event.
I'll ask you this. COVID be damned. Let's say COVID is over by then. What stops WrestleMania from being a 2-night event anyways? Do you think Vince saw it and said, "Hey, we can make it work as a 2-night event even if COVID is over, because then we can sell tickets for 2 days and get more money"?
See, I think the only reason they did it for 2 days was so that we didn't watch an 8-hour show with no crowd.
Yeah.
Or where like it's more digestible when it's like 4 hours, but there's
could you see it being 2 nights even with fans in the crowd?
That's where I'm torn, because I don't think they do that.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, like, WWE has been cutting down the length of pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm.
So like before, it was like every pay-per-view was the fucking length of like 3 Godfather movies put together.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, they're like an hour and a half, like hour and a half to 2 hours. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's why I'm kind of wondering, like, I think there's a chance they do that, but even at that, there's a very strong possibility the IC title still doesn't main event one of the days.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for instance, if we look at this WrestleMania 36, the first day was Undertaker versus AJ, and then second day was Drew versus Brock.
Yeah. A title match, and then a match that I said was like a bigger storyline.
Yeah. Like, I just think it's one of those things of I don't see a situation like that getting him into the main event.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll take this time to say the one that I was thinking.
Go ahead.
Is you give him a Kofi-esque moment of where it's like obviously I'm not saying like, oh, treat it like he's never won the title before. He's been WWE champion before.
Yeah.
But for instance, like, you kind of have it that, like, I mean, obviously I don't know if Vince actually hates him or not or anything. I don't know. But like, you kind of build it in of like Vince starts throwing roadblock after roadblock at the Miz of like trying to stop him, of where, you use that quote of, I'm quitting if I don't main event WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And you have it that either you have him win the Royal Rumble, so he's going to, which I think that'd be a pretty boring way of doing it. Or, honestly, what I was thinking they could do is have it that so many times leading up to it, the Miz gets like that close to it. Like, for instance, in the Royal Rumble, you can have it, he's the last person to be eliminated. In the Elimination Chamber, like, I know typically the Elimination Chamber, they always do, like, for titles. Like, you can have it that, like, he's the person who gets pinned for the person to retain their title, or someone new to take it or anything.
Yeah.
And then I think basically what you do is you get it that, like, he's always that close. And you have it that, obviously, Vince is purposely putting him in situations where he can't win. And then what you do is, on the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania, you have him win to qualify to make it into, like, a triple threat for the title in the main event. Like, it's a really shitty way of getting him in there, but I don't think there's a reasonable way The Miz could main event. Because let's say COVID's not there. I don't see him main eventing over Roman Reigns.
Oh.
I don't see him main eventing over Bray. Or Braun, or there's a lot of stars in the way of, like, I think The Miz is in this weird spot of he's talented. No one denies that. It's the thing is, though, there's so many people who are higher on the totem pole than he is that it's just in a situation of, like, who do you take out of the main event?
It's just where he is right now. He's he's no longer the I want to say he's no longer the A-lister. He's a B+ player. And the way I
Yeah.
say that is not his skill. He's awesome. Like, on the mic, he's the best. I'm going to say one of the best. Because the best would probably be all-time The Rock on the mic. But, like, The Miz on the mic is awesome. The Miz in the ring is awesome. He's a guy that, like you said, can hold the championship, but is more of like the IC title is his title. That's what I think of. Like, when I think of The Miz, I think of the IC title. Just because of how many IC title reigns he's had. But I don't see the Intercontinental Championship being headlined at WrestleMania. But also, it's just of like, there's been a lot of people that have passed him by. And what I mean by that is Brock would be in the main event. Braun Strowman would be in the main event. You said Roman Reigns would be in the main event.
Yeah, Seth Rollins, Bray.
Well, and Seth is a little different now because they did the whole character change where I don't think the Monday Night Messiah is going to be in the main event. But like old Seth Rollins, main event category player. The one thing that is being thrown out there, and this is where I'll take in the other story that we are going to throw onto this, is apparently there's a big match reportedly scheduled for WrestleMania 37. This is coming from July 24th at comicbook.com, getting it from them again. They said, though, that so I'm looking at comicbook.com, really came from Wrestling Observer newsletter. So basically from what they say in their article is originally the plan was for Orton and Edge to have their third match at SummerSlam this year. However, the Backlash match saw Edge suffer a tricep injury, which will keep him out of action for several months. Next month's SummerSlam event could play a big role in setting up the eventual Edge and Orton match in regards to the stakes of the match. The plan for SummerSlam is WWE Champion Drew McIntyre defending against Orton, and there has been some talk backstage that Orton could get the victory there, setting up a long title reign that culminates in the match with Edge at WrestleMania being for the title. However, that booking would also probably be questioned due to the fact that WWE has been trying to get McIntyre over as a new star during the pandemic. Losing the title to Orton and then staying out of the title picture that long might be looked at by some as undermining everything that has been done to benefit McIntyre thus far. What are your thoughts on WWE possibly, first we'll say this, possibly ending Drew's title reign to give the title to Randy Orton?
I mean, you already know that I've said this a million times. Anyone who's ever talked to
no
me
one
about
was
wrestling,
happier for Drew than Soapy.
I fucking cheered. Like, I legitimately was. That was some of the happiest moments I've ever had in wrestling.
A tear in my eye.
I basically had a tear in my eye because I remember. I think I even sent to the Discord about the fact, because I don't think I was watching it live with you guys. It was either I wasn't watching it live, or I came in like right at the end.
Yeah,
and it was like I damn near like not started crying, but like my eyes watered up when I saw when Drew was looking at the camera, and you could tell he was crying. I was like,
happy.
damn, dude.
He was happy.
Yeah. So I'm prefacing it with that. I think it's one of those things of, if they take the belt off Drew, like, I don't want to say like, oh, I'll be pissed, because obviously, there's a reason behind it. And I think it's one of those things of, because me and Ricky were talking about before we started recording, of this could be something we talk about in the future.
Yeah.
Of like how we feel about Drew's reign. I feel it's one of those things of, I don't know if it feels like it's too early, or if it needs to happen because Drew's not being given a fair chance at being champion.
Well, they haven't been
If
able to put him in front of a live crowd.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things.
He's the only champion we've had that hasn't been in front of a live crowd as champion.
I mean, Braun.
I mean, I guess you're right. But I mean, Braun has at least been in title matches in front of a live crowd because he had that Roman Reigns storyline that was fucked up royally at Hell in a Cell when Brock came in. That was when Brock came.
Yeah.
Wasn't that where Brock? No, Brock didn't cash in then. Brock just came up and fucking showed up and just F5, F5, F5. And I remember going, why did Brock show up? And then they put the title back on Brock.
Yeah. Yeah, basically kind of steering it back in the direction of Drew. Like, I'd be fine if they took it, but I think it's one of those things like, don't make Drew look like a wuss. Like, have him go out fighting. Because I love the way he's been booked so far as champion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Drew is one of those people of, like, I feel if there was a crowd, like, there wouldn't be, like, the questions of, like, you know, has he really been a good champion? Because, like, obviously I know there's going to be people who bring up ratings. And honestly, I'm going to be brutally honest here. You know, this is where, stop bringing up TV ratings. No one gives a fuck about them anymore. Yeah. It's if you brought up the views from the network and stuff like that, if they even were actually caught up on the fucking network,
yeah,
like that's when it would change. But I think it's just one of those things of I'd be fine with taking off Drew, but he's got to go down fighting. You can't make Drew look like a coward or anything because it's like he's shit on everyone who's gone against him.
See, and I don't think the Orton Edge match or that rivalry, it doesn't need the title added to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, just what you have alone. Orton brutalized Edge. Then he brutalized Christian. Like, that alone in the storyline has given you enough to add fuel to the fire to where why do you have to add a championship to it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of like, it may be like a really cheap way of kind of getting Randy that one last WWE title reign.
Yeah.
And like, and obviously, don't get me wrong, I love Randy. Randy is one of my favorites, but like, I think I don't want to say he's past the point of needing a championship, but like, I don't think he needs to take it from Drew.
No.
Especially if the only purpose is for it to be involved in that Edge match. Well, because it's what? Does Edge take the title from him? Because if so, then we just have the same type of problem when we had Brock as champ.
I mean, rumor is they want to give Edge at least one more title reign on the way out. That's what I've heard in the past but this was before Edge got injured, that WWE would like to give Edge one more title reign before he retires for good.
And see, I get the sentiment, but at the same time, it's one of those things of like, does Edge really need another title reign? Because the whole thing is like, he's a part-timer now.
Yeah.
And I've always been on the side of part-timers should not be champion. That's why I have never liked when Brock's champion.
So,
like, I don't hate Brock. I just want to preface it with that. It's just I can't stand it when like the championship isn't on TV for months.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we hated Brock at the end, like you mentioned, where it was never on TV. And like, there's a part of me where WWE is playing too hard into it. Like, since Brock lost his title, you've had Seth Rollins mention, I'm going to be a fighting champion. Kofi Kingston, I'm going to be a fighting champion. Becky Lynch, I'm going to be a fighting champion. And like now even with AJ, they're doing Daniel Bryan said you should be a fighting champion. It's like, all right, WWE, we get it. We said we wanted a fighting champion. You don't have to throw it in our face. Just have the title, on TV. Like, I feel like they're throwing it in our face, but the thing that I was this is a little fantasy booking that just came into my head. I want to know what you think of this. You say that you like, oh, we want to give Randy one more title. First, my question is, does it have to be a WWE main title?
I think it's one of those things of if they're thinking about just having him go against Drew, I think they want it to be a main title. Because for instance with the Edge part, like I get it, like that's the perfect segue into getting Edge his final like main title reign. Like I get it. Because then it's he finishes the feud and he gets his last title reign.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't think it's one of those things of like at that point you basically kill two birds with one stone. Of Randy gets his last, or probably maybe last, I don't know. I don't know how fucking long Randy's gonna wrestle.
Well, because
Randy's been wrestling since I was a small child. And I'm fucking 20 years old now. And he still wrestles.
I'm gonna write it for you. You ready? If Randy beats Drew at SummerSlam, I can basically write you WrestleMania. Because it'll be Randy gets the title. Randy has one minor feud with somebody until the Royal Rumble. Edge surprisingly debuts back at the Royal Rumble. Again, we have another pop for Edge. Oh my God, he's back. Except this time he wins it. And then challenges Randy Orton at WrestleMania. That's if Orton wins the title off of Drew. That's what I think they'll have happen. Edge comes back at the Rumble, wins the Rumble, challenges Randy Orton. Boom. There's a main event. Here's a storyline in a fantasy book that I want to ask you about, because this popped into my head. This is why I asked, does it need to be a main title? Because, and when I say main title, I mean Universal or WWE Championship. Because what I think they should do is have the Edge storyline play out. Don't have him get the title off of Drew. Write him just like you've been doing. He's the legend killer. He's running roughshod through people. When Edge is ready to come back, they renew that rivalry, because Edge can have some hatred. You didn't just sideline me. You sidelined my best friend Christian, who didn't deserve what you gave him. And they can have a great match at WrestleMania. In the meantime, think about NXT. From now until WrestleMania, because that's a long time. That's almost a year. You can have a Keith Lee title reign that eventually ends in a Karrion Kross title reign. Then a feud between Karrion Kross and Tommaso Ciampa, which eventually ends with a Tommaso Ciampa title reign. And then, that's why I brought up does it have to be a main title? Could you imagine the takeover at WrestleMania? And they would have a feud building up to this. This wouldn't even be like their first match. This would be like the ending match in their rivalry. A Tommaso Ciampa Randy Orton rivalry that ends. Ultimately, the feud ends with Orton taking the NXT Championship from Tommaso Ciampa and having the NXT Championship at WrestleMania, or WrestleMania weekend. The only main title that Orton has never held.
True. So the way, like, I do like that. I think bringing in NXT as well, because me and you have talked about before how, like, I expect if Randy doesn't win at SummerSlam, I thought, like, because I believe I wrote it up to you either yesterday or the last time we talked.
Yeah.
Of, Randy going down to NXT and, like, kind of having a Charlotte-esque thing. Obviously, not to the same extent of Charlotte, of just, like, running roughshod and then not even taking the pin with losing her title.
Yeah.
But, like, I feel Randy would actually help people. Like, obviously, the stuff like that is, shit that's going to happen no matter what. Like, we don't know what they're going to do with Randy Orton. Because if he doesn't win the title, do you keep him on the main roster? Do you send him back down? Because like I said before, I predict that I think the Undisputed Era will come up to the main roster at some point. My only worry is if you send them to Raw, that's way too many factions on one brand. Because...
And I feel like Fox would want Adam Cole. Because of just because of, I think of the moment on Friday Night SmackDown on Fox, where it was him and Daniel Bryan for the NXT title. And I feel like Fox would be like, no, we want him on this show. We want those ratings, even though apparently Fox isn't happy about ratings, but that's a different conversation for a different day.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things of, I think right now it's just the main roster is in such a weird state of where it's like half the performers aren't, like I would probably assume like half the performers aren't there.
Yeah.
Because of COVID. Obviously, I probably would say, I don't remember exactly when they said like Becky's baby would be born, but like around that time, Seth Rollins is going to be stepping away.
I mean,
so if by that
was money after Money in the Bank, so that was May. So if we're thinking about it, June, July, August, September, October, November, January, February, by March, by WrestleMania, she should be having the baby, either before WrestleMania or shortly after WrestleMania, depending on how far along she was before we knew. Like, we don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Could have been a month along before we knew. We don't know.
Well, I mean, if so, then that baby's probably going to have brain damage because she wrestled a match while pregnant, so...
Okay, then probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
Good catch there, Soaps. That's why we have you on.
Yeah, well, because I remember that was one of the big things that WWE faced criticism over, was that Becky wrestled pregnant, or was believed to wrestle pregnant.
Yeah.
And then people were like, they forced her to do that. It's like, she probably didn't know.
Yeah, she probably didn't know, but
that's besides the point.
But go on with what you were saying before I cut you off.
But like, I think it's one of those things of, and this is kind of deviated a little bit from the original topic, but I'll find a way to steer it back in. Of basically, you wait for when, and I honestly, because I've brought it up to you before about splitting up the Messiah Maniacs and all that, because if you do that, boom, that's when you can have UE show up. Because then hopefully by that point, Kyle O'Reilly is able to come back.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think he's staying home because of COVID and everything, which is reasonable. I'm not going to be like, oh, what a scumbag. I'm not going to do that. But, like, it's one of those things of, I think, the most important thing right now is just figuring out what the hell you're doing with the main roster. Because, like, obviously, I think Drew being champion, I think, is what needs to be done. I think there needs to be a set hierarchy. I don't think you need the wildness of, like, okay, where do we put Drew? Because, obviously, like, Drew is, like, there's no point Drew would not go for the U.S. title. There's no fucking reason.
No.
And there's no way Drew would stay out of a title picture for damn near a year. Like, it's
just like, is there a storyline for Drew without a title? That's the thing.
Because the only one I could think is, like, you find a way to continue the feud with him and Bobby, and maybe by that point, Jinder's healthy. If you take the belt off McIntyre and put it on Randy, like, I'm just kind of confused on, like, do you continue the feud with Bobby Lashley? Which, at that point, I'm kind of like, why continue the feud? There's no belt involved.
Well, that's even a thought that I've had, and I think I've asked you this before, too. So right now, MVP is the U.S. champion. I'm using air quotes because technically he's not, but he's a self-proclaimed U.S. champion. You have Shelton Benjamin, who's now an enforcer for them. He's the 24/7 champ. And I asked you this when I first saw that of, are they going to have that faction have Bobby as the WWE champion? Like, are they going to have title on all three of those guys?
I'm not exactly sure if they are or not, because my main thought is, like, obviously I think Bobby can be a top champion.
We love Bobby.
My main worry is, do we love Bobby?
Do we love Bobby?
like, as much as I do love Bobby, I kind of sit here and think, like, okay, how have they handled his booking?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't know if I want Lana anywhere fucking near that title at all.
If Lana's near it, he lost, because that's what Lana does. She cost Rusev a ton of matches. She cost Rusev his friendship with Aiden English. Lana's just been a bad influence on the Rusev character. I'll say that till the day until the day I die. Sorry, Lana. But you did to yourself. I just like. I don't know how you take the title off of Drew at this moment, because the Drew champion or the Drew championship era has been kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like tainted by COVID. It's just been tainted to
like
where
it has
it's
an
like,
asterisk, basically.
Yeah, basically, because it started off so well, we were happy, but like we haven't seen him in front of a lot live crowd and stuff. And the thing that I think about with like the other side of it, with Randy Orton and us talking about him maybe going down NXT style, why I put up that kind of thought process that I had was, first off, how long is Keith Lee's title reign gonna go? Like, I could see them going and having Keith Lee be champion until SummerSlam would be way too short. But, like, my thought process is maybe at the soonest, he drops the title at the takeover before the Rumble. He's in the Rumble again, and then they call up shortly later Keith Lee to the main roster. Because, like, I feel like Keith Lee is going to be called up sooner rather than later, unless he's like Johnny Gargano and doesn't want anything to do with the main roster. I feel like Keith Lee is going to get called up. I feel like Adam Cole, the reason they took the title off of him was to start to move him up to the main roster. They've already moved Matt Riddle up there, and they're kind of pushing him to the moon, like I said. It's just interesting what storylines we could see moving forward to WrestleMania, because obviously we are so far away from it. Because I'll throw this one out there. Let's say we get the Sasha Bayley feud. Is that a main event match? I would think so. The storyline calls for it. You could have main event Sasha versus Bayley.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of like, that one checks both boxes. Of like, it's going to be a championship, and it's going to be a story that people have wanted.
Yeah.
Like, people have wanted this feud ever since they had it in NXT.
Yeah.
Because those are arguably Bayley's best matches were against Sasha.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things where that probably shows Sasha's the last horsewoman besides Charlotte. But that's besides the point.
Or...
Sorry, I had to insert that in there.
So, I'm going to say no to this because it's way too rushed. But what if they did Cross wins the title off of Keith Lee at SummerSlam. Tommaso Ciampa wins it off of Karrion Kross at Royal Rumble. Orton wins the Rumble. It's just like Charlotte Flair. I get that. Because there's a part of me too that's thinking, are they going to put one of the NXT titles on WrestleMania next year? Or was that just because Charlotte won the Rumble and wanted to challenge Rhea for it?
I think they would, because I think it's also they probably want to condense it to where like they don't have like TakeOver and then WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because that's a thing moving forward. Me and you have talked about NXT as the third brand. But, like, yes, it's developmental, but it's the third brand now. We're like Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Adam Cole. These are guys that are stars in their own right, just like the stars that are on SmackDown and Raw. And some would even say NXT is a better show.
I mean, I'd agree. But that's besides the point.
anything.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was cutting you off.
I don't know. Like I was just gonna say, I think the only thing I disagree with your booking is Ciampa taking the book off of, or not the
Cross.
book.
The
Yeah,
belt.
yeah. I don't agree with him taking it off of Cross, and that's mostly just because it's one of those things of I don't want to say like Cross gets like a stupidly wow, if I could speak English, stupidly long reign
Yeah.
like Cole, because me and you basically both agree on the fact of I don't care for like year-long title reigns.
I
Like
don't
obviously it
either.
makes the champion look really good,
Yeah. I mean, you
but
do it.
like
You do it for some champions, but like, I feel
yeah, I
like
can see them doing it with
WWE
Cross.
now is just like way too long of title reigns.
Yeah, and like obviously I think Cross. I think they're gonna hold off on doing Keith Lee versus Cross. Like I think
I just say that
I don't
because
want.
like this last week on NXT, Cross went after Dijakovic. Again, it looks like they are going to set up a Keith Lee carrying Cross, and like Cross is going to go for the NXT title.
Yeah, it's mostly just like the thing I'm worried about is if you have like obviously I don't mind if Lee's the first one to beat Cross. Like that just makes Lee look even better.
Yeah.
I just think it's one of those things of where it's like when do you decide to pull the trigger with Cross? And when do you decide to pull the trigger with Keith Lee and bring him up to the main roster? Because I think that's one of also the problems with WWE right now is there's way too many main event people. Like there's way too many people like who could be super high up on the totem pole. Because like think about it, like you'd think Kevin Owens would be like one of the top people. He's just kind of been bumbling around in the mid card.
And
like
like,
I think it's
go ahead.
sorry, my bad.
I was going to cut you off again. Go ahead.
I don't know, like I was just gonna say like it's one of those things. If you do call ups, I think it should be like a trade. Of how like Raw traded AJ to SmackDown. Like I think it should be like if Raw, like let's say hypothetically, Raw trades for Keith Lee, they should give up Kevin Owens or someone like that.
Yeah, and there's also been news that like KO wants to go to NXT, but Vince and Trips won't let him go. Which, by the way, I didn't throw out that the day we're recording this, happy birthday to Trips. Triple H's birthday is today. July 27th is when we're recording this. And, like, you bring up the Keith Lee carrying Cross, like, NXT TakeOver Triple X, I know, funny name. That's going to go on August 22nd.
Watch that be when Scarlett Bordeaux makes her actual wrestling debut.
Maybe. The only match we have is going to be a triple threat ladder match. And right now, all we know is Bronson Reed won the triple threat match between Johnny Gargano and Roderick Strong. We've got one next Wednesday, which Soapy, I know you know who I'm going to want to win this one, of Timothy Thatcher, Finn Balor, and Dexter Lumis.
Oh, dude, it's Loomis.
Dude, it's Loomis all day, every day. And then there's a third TBA versus TBA versus TBA, or TBD. So it looks like we're going to have a triple threat ladder match for the North American title. That's all we know for NXT TakeOver Triple X at the moment. So, I mean, yeah, we don't even know what they're going to do with Karrion Kross. Maybe they're going to let it be a slow burn, but I would find it shocking if Keith Lee is not defending his title at NXT TakeOver Triple X. Last thing I want to ask you, though, before we wrap everything up for this first edition of the MVP Wrestling Podcast. This is a question that comes because both you and I have talked about this in the past. We are both avid listeners, although I still need to catch up on the New Day Pod.
Day Pod.
New Day Pod. New Day Pod. New Day rocks. So this week on SmackDown, they teased the Big E solo push. Kofi comes out. Kofi says, hey, I'm going to be out for 6 weeks. Go do your thing, man. You have the blessing from Woods and myself. The question I want to ask you to end the podcast. If you are writing Big E's first feud to push his solo career, he's won solo shit before, but I mean the solo push right now. Who should Big E feud with to start this solo push?
See, to me, this is like a tough one of where it's like, how fast do you push him?
Mm-hmm.
Because like with the 6 weeks really isn't that much time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing of where I'm like, okay, where are we gonna basically go with this? Of if it's just gonna be like, if this is just building up matches, I agree with the one you told me before. If you'd like to reveal that one, I wouldn't mind if you went against that person.
I will. And the reason why I'm saying this is it's Sheamus. And the reason why I say Sheamus is for two reasons. Number one, they have a history. Obviously, the Bar and the New Day have some feud between them, some heat between them, some great matches between them. But also, think about Sheamus ever since he's come back to Friday Night SmackDown. He went after Shorty G. He now picked on Jeff Hardy and was basically the bully in both of those situations. I think that Big E's first feud could be a feud with Sheamus, where basically Sheamus is the heel, Big E's the babyface, and they have a great couple of matches, and maybe they kind of not go back, but they reference their feuds between them and the Bar. Maybe Sheamus can also reference and throw out there, because he's friends with Cesaro, who just beat the New Day for the SmackDown Tag Champions. Like, I feel like, to me, that is the first person I would put them against. But you know who else I would love to see? And I only thought about this as we went through the podcast. You know who I would love to see Big E feud with in the future, but it would be like down the road? Ooh. Could you imagine a Keith Lee Big E?
That's a whole lot of meaty men right there.
Not even a feud, just a match between Keith Lee and Big E. Like,
that's a whole lot of meat in there.
But I know we're saving Keith Lee for Brock Lesnar when COVID's over. I know we're saving that matchup. But Sheamus would be the one that I choose. I don't know if you have a different one, or if you even thought of one, since I asked you, maybe an hour and a half ago?
Yeah, I mean, because I thought it was just like, who do I want to see him feud with? And I said AJ, because I wanted to go for a title.
Could we see him have a title again?
I think we could. I think it's mostly just, it really depends on how this singles push goes. Because Big E is a million times better than what he started off as in WWE.
Yeah.
And it's because he's finally found that charisma that he didn't have as Big E Langston.
Yeah. Which some people are saying, bring back Big E Langston. Some people want to see it.
See, I don't want Big E Langston, because that basically means he has to go back to being a heel.
Yeah.
Because Big E Langston was a heel. And it's right now, I think Big E should not be a heel, because then that means they're going to split the New Day. And I'm going to be brutally honest.
Don't split the New Day.
We may fucking go for, Creed for G4 all the time.
Yeah.
That won't... he better fucking hope to God then it's Creed for G4. Because WWE was not using Creed before.
Yeah. And let's be honest, of the New Day, the ones they like are Big E and Kofi.
Yeah. Well, it's also because it's just Xavier's a little guy.
Yeah.
He's a little short.
Vince don't like little guys.
Yeah.
Look at Shorty G, who still is Shorty fucking G. His name is Chad Gable, folks. Come on. Chad fucking Gable.
Well, especially when you see the fucking Battle of the Brands things, and when he cuts his own promos, and he does the fucking Reading Willing Gable. Like, that's actually like a pretty good, slogan.
Yeah. Or like the funny thing I saw is someone threw up a picture of the Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexander, and Ricochet on WWE's Twitter account, and they were like, name this tag team. And someone was like, stars that Vince McMahon doesn't know how to use. Because it's true. Yeah. Ricochet hasn't been much since being called up. Cedric Alexander hasn't been anything since the cruiserweight division. And Mustafa Ali was going to get a push but got injured. Thank God we got Kofi Mania. Sorry, Mustafa. Chicago boy home and rep it. But yeah, it's just, I can't wait to see what they do with the Big E solo push, even if it's just 6 weeks. Anything you think we missed out on any of the topics we talked about today, Soapy?
I guess I would probably say it is with the Big E topic of, I'm trying to just think of just anyone else I'd want to see him feud with.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's one of those things of like, how far do you try to shoot him up the totem pole of WWE? Like, I don't think he gets the Universal title, or at least like gets put in that realm.
Intercontinental champion is where I put the cap. I could see him being a future IC title winner if they want to push him. That's them pushing him to the moon.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things of, I think if that's where we want the cap to be, put him in a feud with AJ. Or at least, like, I was almost even thinking, like, even with Matt Riddle, of where it's like, obviously, you probably wouldn't want Matt Riddle to, start looking really good. But, like, for instance, like, you can make Big E look good in defeat. You can make Matt Riddle look good in defeat. And I think it's either one of them, they're going to get a good match out of each other.
When it comes to the IC title, though, I've said it before on this podcast, I'll say it again, Matt Riddle is the main one that I don't know what they are going to do. I truly do not know because if they're going to push him to the moon, they're going to give him the IC title.
Yeah. Well, because I also think right now, I think they're probably holding off just because he's had all the allegations against him. So I think right now, I think that's why his push has kind of been slowed. But I mean, hey,
say that one more time. I wasn't. I had lost track a little bit. I had to send a text.
It was like I said, I feel like one of the reasons why his push is like not slowed down, but like it's not as rapid as it was before is because he has the allegations around him right now.
Okay, so you think that's why they pulled back a little bit and they're not having him? Why they didn't have him? Basically, they had him lose to AJ. And then now they don't. They have him basically in a feud against Baron Corbin.
Yeah, this is just to kind of hold him over for now.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the allegations are settled and everything.
No, I get that. Like, and that's another thing too with Matt Riddle. It seemed a little misplaced that like Velveteen Dream dropped completely, hasn't been cut, but dropped completely, where Matt Riddle got called up to SmackDown. And was in IC title matches. But that's going to do it for the first ever MVP Wrestling podcast. I want to thank Soapy for joining me for the first of many MVP Wrestling podcasts. If you want to check out the podcast, you can right here on YouTube, youtube.com/ I think it's MVP Nerd, but that's going to change. I don't know what it's changed to yet, but right here on the MVP channel. You can also submit any listener questions to us by being a patron. Patreon.com/ Most Valuable Podcast. $5 tier, you get to submit your questions to the podcast. Soapy and myself will answer them on the podcast. You can also tell us what you think down below in that comment section. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. I want to thank Soapy for joining me on this one. Hopefully the first of many podcasts, wrestling podcasts here on MVP Entertainment. But as always, have a good day, everybody.